أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful, we ask Allah to send His greatest peace and blessings upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. We praise Allah for all the blessings He has given us. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the blessings He has given us, and the greatest blessing being that He allowed us to be of the ones who remain steadfast, dedicated, and loyal on the path of our Master after the Prophet, the commander of the faithful, the prince of the believers, the protector of the Prophet and his message, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We praise Allah for this blessing and every blessing, for without Allah, we would have nothing. Assalamu alaikum, my dear respected brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we continue in the conversation of the vision of a virtuous community. And the focus of our conversation tonight is going to delve into having an understanding of what are the principles of a community are. What are the foundations of a community? Altogether, we're looking at, can we achieve unity in community in the sense of what Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam gave us? Theologically, how are we going to understand the foundations of a community and how isolationism as individuals is not accepted for us in the way we engage within our community? So we're going to be covering, inshallah, the following questions. One, how is diversity a divine doctrine? How is diversity something that is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a divine doctrine? Secondly, why does community even matter according to Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, our sixth Imam? Thirdly, how can we be like the Ansar of the Prophet? The supporters of the Prophet, the Ansar who welcomed the Prophet in the city of Medina after he migrated from the city of Mecca. Fourthly, what is the qualifier for al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy al munkar, otherwise known as enjoining in the good and forbidding the evil? And fifth, what is the doctrine of husn al-dhan? Finally, who is not considered to be a Muslim in accordance to the words of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam? So with that, we'll jump into question number one, which is, how is diversity a divine doctrine? When we're looking at diversity, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of diversity in the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 49, verse 13, He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ilan lita'arafu. إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and we made you into nations and tribes so that you may get to know one another. Indeed, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is the most God-weary or the most pious. God is all-knowing and God is all-aware. Now, when we look at this verse from the Holy Quran, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us how He created us. But if you look deeper into it, we see that God is giving us the true purpose behind why He created us into tribes and nations, male and female. He created us this way so that we may get to know one another. When we think of diversity from a sociological standpoint, we see people that are coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, different ethnicities, races, religions, creed, families, etc. When you're looking at all of that, the core of all of those categorizations is that we are, based on certain traits and characteristics, we are different than one another. Male, female, this family, that family, this country, that country, this town, that town, this race, that race. When we're looking at all of this together and we see each other in the differences that we have, and whatever categorization of identity, God is telling us that I did this for you because I want you to get to know one another. The purpose here is getting to know one another, understanding our differences, understanding our different experiences and where we come from, whether it be in our culture, in our norms, in our customs, the things we like, the things that we don't like, what we see within our system of living. I may be coming from one side of the world and someone else is coming from a different place in the world. Just because I'm from one place doesn't necessarily make me better than the other. By mere virtue of us being from different places and different experiences, God is allowing us to celebrate those differences by how? By getting to know one another. It's amazing that during the time of the Prophet, people came from all walks of life. And what people were most attracted to by the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that he didn't consider anyone to be better than the next, merely because of the tribe that they came from, the family that they came from, the color of their skin, or even necessarily them belonging to his faith or not. The Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, treated people equally across the board. He was with people in a way where they would gravitate towards him just merely by his akhlaq, his ethics, his mannerisms, the way he engaged and talked to people. You see, at the time of the Prophet, he enfranchised minorities. He made people know that it doesn't matter the color of your skin, that you are all in the eyes of God equal. And that if one is to wish to have status with God, it is only through piety. It is only through your deeds. It is only through your actions that you can claim or want to be one who is greater than the next. And naturally, when you're looking at a system of piety, theologically and ethically, piety always induces one to look at himself as not better than the next person, because we're mandated by humbleness and humility. So with this entire system that's established by virtue of the verses of the Holy Quran and the conduct of the Prophet and the way he engaged with people, black, white, red, yellow, Qarashi, Arabi, Ajami, Arab or non-Arab, whatever tribe or nation that they came from, they were accepted. They were treated with kindness, with virtue, with honor and dignity. Take the example of Salman al-Muhammadi, or who was originally known as Salman al-Farisi. He became known also as Salman al-Muhammadi because of his closeness and attachment to the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, where the Holy Prophet would say, Ya Salman, anta minna ahlul bayt. O Salman, you are from us, ahlul bayt. Salman would be a Persian. He would come into the fold of the Muslim society and be celebrated as one of the greatest companions of the Holy Prophet. And he would be looked to as one of the counsel of the Prophet when it came to military strategy, when it came to social engagement, when it came to building of communities in the city of Medina and warding off enemies and the threats that were coming from those who wanted to persecute the Muslims. Salman was celebrated and honored, and he wasn't pushed to the side merely because he was a Ajami, as in he was a non-Arab. Even though some of the Arabs at that time who had a backwards mentality and didn't fully understand and take Islam into their hearts and into their conduct and deeds, they would want to push people aside like that. They would want to push people aside like Bilal al-Habashi, one of the greatest companions of the Prophet and the one who would be known to go and give the call to prayer. And the Prophet would praise him as being one who he would love to hear the voice of Bilal as he would give the call to prayer. Bilal was a black slave and he was freed at the time of the Prophet. He was freed by the Prophet himself. When it came to all of these individuals, regardless of their background, another example is Abu Dharr al-Ghafari. Abu Dharr was considered to be by some of a lowly socioeconomic status. He was looked at by some as even a thug or even a gangster, if you will. He wasn't looked fondly by the chieftains of Quraysh and those who were the elites of society. But Abu Dharr was, again, like the others, welcomed. Regardless of the way people looked at him in society, he was welcomed for who he was. And he brought Islam into his life. And he brought Iman into his heart. And he became the best and highest version of himself. And these individuals, all minorities within that community, became celebrated as some of the greatest companions of the Prophet and of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Now, when we put this all together, we realize that diversity is not just something that is an accessory that we can talk about and say, yeah, we believe in diversity and we appreciate diversity and diversity is a good thing. Rather, diversity is a godly mandate. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to accept the diversity that you have in your life and to celebrate it. That if people are different than you, to get to know them, to engage with them, to be with them. And that's something that is essential for all of us to keep in mind in the way we look at one another, especially within our own community. And when I say within our own community, we find at times that because we have differences in the way we do things, it could be between centers, organizations, families, neighborhoods, towns, because of our customs or our norms or some of the cultural things that we do, we may disagree with one another. And we may not want to associate with one another just because we're different. But if we look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this verse, He's telling us, listen, I created you this way, different. I created you this way, diverse, so that you can actually get to know one another. I want that for you. So let's celebrate our diversity. Let's get to know one another, welcome the differences, and understand that in these differences, we can see a beauty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, so long as that we're all with the pure intention of serving God and serving each other as brothers and sisters in faith and in equals in creation and humanity. Now, going on to the second question, we're asking, why does community even matter? And we're looking at it in accordance to Imam al-Sadiq. How did Imam al-Sadiq look at community, and how does he describe it as being something that is essential and significant? All of the Prophet's disciples spoke extensively about the virtue that lies in caring for one's community and being actively engaged as a member of that community. Now, when we're looking at this engagement, Imam al-Sadiq beautifully describes in telling his companions and his followers. He says, عليكم بالصلاة في المساجد وحسن الجوار. عليكم بالصلاة في المساجد وحسن الجوار للناس وإقامة الشهادة والحضور الجنائز وحضور الجنائز. إنه لا بد لكم من الناس. إن أحدا لا يستغني عن الناس في حياته والناس لا بد لبعضهم من بعض. So this is cited in this narration specifically is cited by the 17th century scholar who is renowned in the Shia school of thought, Sheikh al-Hur al-Amili, who has a famous work called Wasa'il al-Shia. A lot of our narrations that we look to are often cited in Wasa'il al-Shia. And what the Imam here said, he said that basically, make sure, as he's talking to his followers, he says, make sure that you perform prayers in the mosques. Be good to your neighbors. Be good neighbors to people. Testify as witnesses and attend funerals. Indeed, you can't escape your need for people. No one can be independent of people during his life, as people need one another. The Imam is giving us a basic understanding of how do we look at one another and how do we engage within our community. In our community, we have to realize, as in every community, that people need one another. Just because I may feel that I'm self-sufficient in what I'm doing in my business, in my family, in my projects, that I don't need people anymore because I'm good by myself. I can operate completely by myself without people. But really, when it comes down to it, no, you can't. Every one of us needs each other, and we can't push each other away or not engage with one another because of a false pretense that we're good on our own. The idea of isolating oneself as an individual or as a family from the rest of the community is something that Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam did not sanction. This isn't something that Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam gave us a thumbs up for. Instead, they said, when you're praying, go pray in the mosque. You should be praying in the mosque. You should be seeing people. You should be in congregational prayers. When you have neighbors in a neighborhood, you should be the best neighbors. You should be engaging with people in a way where they know that they can turn to you for help if they need it. And if you do engage with them, it's always a pleasant type of engagement. Testify as witnesses, as in when there's an issue in the community, there's a problem in a court of law. And of course, this specifically speaking at the time of the Imam, where there is a system that the Imam was participating in, and he is telling his companions and his followers at that time that for them to participate as witnesses. Even at the times where the judge himself, though the Imam is present, the judge himself wasn't the Imam. But he's telling his followers to go and participate as witnesses so that they continue to be part of the community and instill justice in that community and instill equity in that community. And finally, attending funerals. Now, imagine for us, if we isolate ourselves and we say we don't want to be part of our community, when we pass away or a family member passes away, why would people console us and give us their condolences and be there for us and attend with us if we're not ones who are also going to do the same and be there for them when they need us? This is so essential because the basic human need is that of his brother, is that of his sister, is that of his fellow community member. And we need to be there for one another. Now, in that vein, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam also in Wasail al-Shia cited by Sheikh al-Amili. And the third question, how does one be like the Ansar of the Prophet? How can I be like the supporters of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those who were there for him to welcome him as he migrated or fled from the persecution of the Meccans and he went to Medina? Those people that supported him and helped him became known as the Ansar. So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam tells us, in this narration he says, وَيَحَقُّ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِينَ الْإِجْتِهَادِ فِي التَّوَاصُلِ والتعاقد على التعاطف والمواساة لأهل الحاجة وتعاطف بعضهم على بعض حتى تكونوا كما أمركم الله عز وجل رحماء بينكم متراحمين مختمين لما غاب عنكم من أمرهم على ما مضى عليه معشر الأنصار على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. The Imam says, it is incumbent on the Muslims to strive in communicating with one another, to commit to sympathy and consolation to those who are in need, to feel with them, to be sympathetic amongst one another. Thus you would be as God Almighty has commanded you. This is coming from, again, a divine mandate. Merciful amongst yourself and to one another. Sorrowful for what you do not know of their struggles and the struggles that they face. And in that, you would be like the Ansar at the time of the Messenger of Allah. Now, the core of what the Imam is saying is basically care for people, be there for one another. And if you care for people and you're there for one another, you're going to be like those who supported the Prophet. You're going to be following that divine mandate, which is to be merciful amongst each other and to be sorrowful for the things that are happening. You and I, if I see something happening to another community member, they just lost their home, they just lost a family member, they got into a very bad accident, they're in the hospital, they're sick, they caught the COVID-19 virus. Any one of these issues, if I hear that somebody in my community is experiencing that, I'm going to feel devastated. I'm going to feel hurt. I'm going to be sorrowful over that. And at the same time, I'm going to extend my hand to see how can I be of help? How can I be for that person? Now imagine you and I, what we did is instead is we kept ourselves isolated. We didn't check on one another. We didn't message one another. Salam, how are you? Just wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing. Inshallah, you're doing well and you're staying safe during this time. Brothers and sisters, the effect and the impact that's had by a mere text message that you and I will take 15 seconds out of our day to just send somebody, hey, how are you? Salam, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I hope you and your family are staying safe. If you need anything, let me know. That can go miles for somebody. That gesture is what we're talking about here. And then making that consistent in your behavior and your conduct and your engagement with people. That is so essential for us, especially for people that don't have, let's say, maybe a support system that you may have within your family, especially for a lot of new Muslims, converts into the faith that may, for example, during the holy month of Ramadan, they may be breaking fast by themselves. They may be fasting truly by themselves. They may not have anybody to turn to. Students that have been studying abroad, people that are working in different cities that they're just starting up in. or honestly, anybody for that matter. Sometimes the sense of loneliness or the sense of detachment that we have can be experienced by people with big families as well. It's not always reserved for maybe some of these more typical examples. And for that, we need to be ones who intend on taking care of one another by checking on one another and having that sympathy or that empathy in our hearts for one another so that we can truly act like the supporters of the Prophet and be like him. And if we do that, the Imam is telling us, hey, you have a seal from us that if you are empathetic, sympathetic, your heart is tender towards people, you have an open heart and an open mind to check on people and be there for them, you're going to be like the Ansar of the Prophet. Now, moving forward, when we look at the sense of community, checking on one another, being there for one another, and having that role in our community, there's an essential doctrine that we face, which is al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy al-munkar. Because there's certain things that are in our community that we see that are wrong. And by virtue of our responsibilities from within the branches of our faith, furu' ad-din, when we're looking at our responsibilities in practice, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar is one of those, enjoining in good and forbidding the evil. That is one of our responsibilities. In fact, this responsibility, this obligation, is spoken about by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam as being فريضة عظيمة بها تقام الفرائض وتأمن المذاهب. It is a great obligation. Through it, all other obligations are established. The faith is secured. Earnings are legitimized or legitimated, as one of the ways of saying it. What is usurped is returned to its rightful owner, and cities are actually built. Communities are built. Through it, justice is established amongst enemies, and all matters are made upright. Now, the Imams are telling us that this is so important, this idea of engaging or enjoining in the good and forbidding what is evil. Now, how do we do that? When basically the concept here is, for example, it's time to pray, people should pray. People aren't praying, they should be praying within our community, right? Within people that are practicing and people that have the faith. And when it comes to certain things that are bad, when it comes to certain things that are evil, that are haram, that are vice, then they shouldn't be happening. They should be stopped. And us as a community, essentially, we need to be promoting the goodness, having that peer pressure in a positive way, and that peer pressure towards those negative things that are happening, that we need to be able to apply some type of pressure amongst ourselves for that to happen in a positive way, or for things that are negative to happen. If someone is being harmed, someone is being bullied, somebody is their rights are being taken away, of course that there's a stop that is put to that. Now, the first and foremost thing that's needed in enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, as explained by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, that it would be if you can stop this thing from that's bad that's happening, or something that's good that you need to make sure that's happening, that could be something that you do physically, that you make it happen. For example, my son is not praying, it's time for prayer, Yalla ibni, let's get up and pray. By my own hand, I can encourage my son to get up and pray. Or my son, he's, let's say, hitting his sibling and harming them, hurting them. It's not just playful activity anymore. I'm going to tell him, Ibni, stop, and I'll actually remove them and from hitting his sibling. Those are just two basic examples of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. Now, the first stage is if I can effectively make it happen by my own hand, then I will. If I can't by my own hand, then I would actually at least speak about it. That I would say, hey, don't do that, right? If let's say I'm in the street and I see somebody being harmed, being assaulted, but I am, let's say, an elderly person, and I can't effectively separate the situation without bringing harm to myself and other people, then at the very least, maybe I would say, hey, stop hurting that young man. Then finally, the very least, the third option would be, if I know that I can't do something about it and I can't say something about it, at the very least, I know in my heart that I don't like what's going on. The qualifier of all of this is what? The qualifier is effectiveness. Now, when we're looking at effectiveness, we're essentially seeing that if what you're doing is going to actually effectuate change, is going to bring about change, whether it's for doing the positive thing or eliminating the negative thing, the evil thing, then you do it. If it's not going to do that, and it may actually bring greater harm, then you don't have responsibility in that situation to either promote that specific good act with that individual or to forbid that evil act from that individual. Because in some situations, it may actually cause greater harm to get involved with that. Now, at the same time of all of this happening, with enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, there are situations where we may view people by mere conversation or observation and seeing situations that are not so obvious, right? That could be suspicious or could look one way or another, could be interpreted in multiple ways, right? So, for example, if I see a young couple, at a restaurant, let's say I'm working at a restaurant, or I myself am visiting the restaurant. Nowadays with COVID-19, it's not as, we can't be doing that anymore and practicing social distancing. But let's say pre-COVID-19, I'm going to the restaurant, I'm going to dine in, and I see a young couple there. I look at the young couple and I see, a brother and a sister from the community, for example. And I haven't seen this brother in years. But last that I knew is the brother was not married. But I see him sitting down with this sister in the community, and they're at this restaurant. I could jump to the conclusion that they're not a married couple. And I could assume that, let's say, they're having a date or they're having a meal together, and it's not an appropriate situation. I could assume that there isn't anything legitimate going on there. And I can look down upon those two. Or I can give the benefit of the doubt until I've gotten more information. The whole benefit of the doubt comes to the fifth question that we asked, which was, what is the doctrine of husn al-dhan? So in a lot of situations that we face in our community, to preserve the sanctity and the sacredness of our community as believers and respecting one another and making sure that we're honoring one another, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Holy Quran, in the verse where He says, "Ijtanibu kathiran min al-dhan," to avoid much of doubt, فَإِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ, that some of doubts is a sin or is sinful. We see also attributed to Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, beyond the idea of just bad doubts and the way we look at one another, the way they tell us to look and consider the matters of our brothers and sisters. So when it comes to the doctrine of husn al-dhan and seeing suspicious or somewhat unclear situations in the way we look at one another and the way we deal with one another, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam narrates from his grandfather Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, where he says, "ضع أمر أخيك على أحسنه." Keep your consideration on the matters of your brother in the best light. حتى يأتيك منه ما يغلبك, until you see of him what prevails over all other justifications. And do not think ill of any word that comes out of him, so long as you find a possible good meaning in it. Now take a second to think about that. The Imam is basically telling us, unless you have anything to prove otherwise, you're always going to be looking at your brother or your sister in a positive light, even in suspicious situations. Now, put aside our own obligation within ourselves, as in the people that are in the suspicious situations, that, hey, you shouldn't be in a suspicious situation to begin with. But put that aside, it's our response to suspicious situations or unclear situations as the way we look at them. Even, for example, it could be through texting. It could be through conversation where, oh, did you really mean that? Or us actually just jumping to the conclusion that they meant something negative. You could be talking to your brother, your sister, your friend, a colleague, and by looking at an email, you see something that is said in a certain way, or you're looking at a text message and you see something that's said in a certain way, and I guess it didn't have a smiley emoji at the end, so that it sounded kind of rude. And you took it as it being rude. But realize that in those communications, for example, in those communications themselves, you're only dealing with 7% of communication. 7% of communication be it through the words that we use. 37% of communication coming through our voice. So we jump to 45% of communication when we're actually listening to someone, let's say via phone call. And then 55% of communication is coming through what? Our body language, our non-verbal communication. That's what makes up our communication with one another. And a lot of times we jump to negative conclusions and bad doubts just on the basis of what? The words that are used in 7% of communication. The doctrine of husn al-dhan is there, where we need to make sure we're taking care of one another and looking at each other in a positive light. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam tells us, لا تفتش الناس فتبقى بلا صديق. Do not go and examine people for their faults, as you will remain without friends if you do so. The Imam makes it clear to us how we need to be looking at each other and how we need to be looking at ourselves. Now, bringing this all together, we ask ourselves, as by virtue of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, who did they consider not to be a Muslim? The Holy Prophet ﷺ has narrated by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, مَنْ سَمِعَ رَجُلًا يُنَادِي يَا لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ فَلَمْ يُجِبْهُ فَلَيْسَ بِمُسْلِمٍ. The one who hears a Muslim calling, "O Muslims, help," but does not answer, he himself is not a Muslim. And then Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam would also go on to say that whoever does not care about the affairs of the Muslims is surely himself or herself not a Muslim. Now, brothers and sisters, we covered the several questions that we looked at, the 6 questions that we looked at, being from the very beginning that, number 1, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala celebrates diversity and explains his intention of creating us into different tribes and nations in the Holy Quran. That the doctrine of diversity is something that's mandated by God. Secondly, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam emphasizes community as people needing one another, and isolationism as individuals is not something that is accepted or sanctioned in our belief as followers of Ahlul Bayt and as Muslims. Thirdly, to take care of one another and to be sympathetic, empathetic, and check on one another and be there for one another is what allows us to be like the Ansar, the supporters of the Prophet. Fourthly, effectiveness is the qualifier for enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. If something is not going to be done effectively by your hand or by your speech, at the very least you have it in your heart that you want this good to happen or you want this evil to stop. Effectiveness is the qualifier in making that step towards this or not. Fifth, giving the benefit of the doubt is a doctrine in our faith called husn al-dhan, and we need to be always looking for what is better in people and assuming what is best in people rather than looking at them in a negative light. People are innocent until proven guilty. Sixth, the one who does not care about what is going on in the ummah, one who does not care about what's going on in the community of Muslims is himself indeed not a Muslim, as per the Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Brothers and sisters, we end with this, and inshallah we'll continue the conversations that we're having, the discussions that we're having in the vision of a virtuous community in the coming nights. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على نبينا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.